There's a counterintuitive truth about people who are genuinely excellent at something. They are obsessed with how other people do it wrong, not out of arrogance, out of precision. They've developed such a clear picture of what actually works that they can see, almost immediately, where someone else's approach has a flaw baked into it. A shortcut that costs more than it saves. A strength that only works until the moment it doesn't. Musashi dedicated an entire scroll of the Book of Five Rings to exactly this. Not to his own strategy. He'd covered that in the first three scrolls. The Wind Scroll is about everyone else's. What other schools of thought get wrong, why they get it wrong, and what studying those mistakes teaches you about getting it right. It is, quietly, one of the most useful things he ever wrote. If you're just joining us, Miyamoto Musashi, 17th century Japan, 61 duels, never lost. His final work, the Book of Five Rings, is a 5-part manual on strategy, discipline, and how to think under pressure. The first 3 scrolls, ground, water, fire, build his own framework from the foundation up. The ground scroll is about honest self-assessment. The water scroll is about staying fluid under pressure. The fire scroll is about not beating yourself in the heat of the moment. The wind scroll is different. Instead of adding another layer to his own approach, Musashi turns outward and studies the competition. He looks at the other major schools of swordsmanship of his era, identifies what each one gets wrong, and explains why those mistakes matter. The result is something that reads less like a strategy manual and more like a masterclass in critical thinking. The name is deliberate. Wind, in Japanese tradition, carries the sense of the style of others, the way things move in the world around you, the prevailing approaches and conventions of your era. Musashi's point is that you cannot fully understand your own approach until you've genuinely studied the alternatives. Not to copy them, not to dismiss them, to understand precisely where they work, where they break down, and why, so that your own thinking becomes sharper by contrast. This is actually how the best thinkers in almost any field operate. The scientist who knows the history of wrong theories in their discipline isn't wasting time on dead ends. They're building a map of the terrain that keeps them from wandering into the same dead ends again. The investor who deeply understands why certain strategies fail in certain conditions isn't dwelling on loss. They're building judgment that can't be bought any other way. Musashi would recognize both of them immediately. Study what doesn't work. With the same rigor, you study what does. Musashi identifies several specific errors across the competing schools of his time. 3 of them show up everywhere, in every era, in almost every discipline. The first, relying on a single strength and building everything around it. He observed schools that became so specialized, so committed to one technique, one style, one condition in which they excelled, that they were formidable in exactly that scenario and fragile everywhere else. The negotiator who only knows how to win by aggression. The manager who only knows how to lead when things are going well. The athlete whose entire game is built around one physical attribute that time will eventually take away. Musashi's term for this trap was one-sided. A one-sided approach gives you a ceiling. You can only ever be as effective as that one strength allows. And worse, a skilled opponent who understands your single strength doesn't need to overcome it. They just need to take you somewhere it doesn't apply. The second mistake, mistaking complexity for depth. He saw schools that had accumulated enormous numbers of techniques, stances, and sequences, elaborate systems that took years to master in full, and his assessment was blunt. Most of it was decoration. The complexity wasn't making the students better. It was making them feel like they were getting better, which is a different thing entirely. This is everywhere in the modern world. The productivity system so elaborate it takes more energy to maintain than it saves. The business plan so detailed it never becomes a business. The training program so complicated that following the program becomes the goal rather than the fitness it was supposed to produce. Complexity is seductive because it feels like rigor. Musashi's counter is sharp. If it doesn't make you more effective in the actual moment that matters, it is weight, not skill. The third mistake, and the one that quietly ruins the most people, is optimizing for appearance over outcome. He noticed schools that had drifted, over time, toward performing mastery rather than developing it. Beautiful form, impressive demonstrations, techniques designed to look decisive in controlled conditions. And underneath that surface, limited ability to adapt when conditions changed, when the situation stopped cooperating with the choreography. You've seen this in professional life too. The person who is extraordinary at presenting in meetings and ordinary at the work the meetings are about. The leader who manages optics brilliantly and outcomes poorly. The expert whose confidence comes from looking right rather than being right. Musashi's diagnosis. When appearance becomes the goal, effectiveness quietly walks out the door. And usually nobody notices until the moment it costs something real. Here's what Musashi is actually teaching in the wind scroll, underneath the critique of other schools. He's teaching you how to develop judgment, not just skill. Skill is knowing how to do something. Judgment is knowing why it works, under what conditions it stops working, and what the alternatives cost. You can have considerable skill without much judgment, but you cannot have real mastery without both. The way to build judgment, his way, the way that actually held up across 61 duels, is to study failure as carefully as success, to look at the approaches that seem to be working and ask, where does this break? What condition would expose the flaw in this? What's the cost being hidden by the current result? That habit of mind is what separates people who are good from people who stay good when the conditions change. Think about your own field, whatever you spend serious time on. What's the dominant approach in that space? The conventional wisdom, the standard playbook, the way most serious people do it. Now ask Musashi's question, where does it break? What condition would expose its flaw? What is it optimizing for that isn't quite the same as the thing you actually care about? You don't have to reject the conventional approach to ask those questions. You just have to be willing to look at it honestly, rather than accept it because everyone else has. That's the wind scroll. Study the wind. Know how it moves, where it shifts, what it can't do. It will make your own position clearer than any amount of time spent only studying yourself. 3 questions worth sitting with after this one. What single strength are you building everything around? And what happens when you're taken somewhere it doesn't apply? Where in your life is complexity masquerading as depth? And where are you optimizing for how things look rather than what they actually produce? Next time, we reach the final scroll, the void. It's the shortest one Musashi wrote, and it might be the hardest to explain. He's going to ask you to hold mastery and emptiness in the same hand at the same time, and somehow make that practical. See you in the next scroll.